The base is dropped on a new week of Soccer Down here. It's October 28th. MLS Cup Conference Finals are this week. They start out west tomorrow night, LAFC hosting Seattle. They finish in the east on Wednesday night, Atlanta United hosting Toronto FC. We'll get you set for all of that. We're going to talk NWSL Championship as well with Jessica Charman at 10 o'clock. We're going to dig into some of the reports around the game as well. The North Carolina Courage didn't make it much of a match. They dominated the Chicago Red Stars on their way to a big, big win and back-to-back titles. But there were lots of stories that came out of Cary, North Carolina, and we'll get into all of that with Jess in the second hour. John, let's start with what's at stake coming up this week with Seattle going to LA, with Toronto coming to Atlanta. And kind of the vibe here, I think most people, actually, I don't know, because I'm seeing some interesting reports from MLSsoccer.com. Imagine that. I'm seeing some interesting reports that there's overwhelmingly people thinking LAFC will beat Seattle, and not so much on Atlanta and Toronto. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just one of those things. But let's start with the West. We'll have plenty of time to get into the East. We've got an extra day. Let's look at LA and Seattle. These are two teams that have been, Seattle's been the class of the Western Conference for a long time. They've been to the playoffs every year they've been in the league. They have a championship. They have another cup final where they came up short. They have been, one of those heavyweight teams, but this year it's been interesting. Honestly, last couple of years it's been interesting. Some of the comments out of Seattle in that, they were, before what a lot of people say about Atlanta now, that there's an attitude that Atlanta invented soccer. Seattle used to be that team that everybody hated because they were the big club and they had a big fan base. Well, now the vibe out of the Seattle camp is much more of, we're not as big as we used to be. There's bigger things going on, and LAFC, I think, is maybe one of those. I think some people have looked at this maybe as a statement. Maybe it's an opportunity for Seattle to say, hey, not so fast. We're still the big boys around here. I don't know if it really is or not. I think LAFC is a better team than Seattle. I think they are the prohibitive favorite here, but I don't know what this means in the bigger picture when it comes to a Seattle team that, where do they stand? Where are they in the Western Conference these days in an overall power ranking, not just this season, not roster right now, but just in the big clubs of the West? Are they still in that conversation?
I would think so. And you go, and as I say that, because of them being detached from East Coast coverage and everyone's focus being shown on LAFC as the new shiny object and all of the points records, goal difference, all that kind of stuff, I think that as a two seed, you're sitting there and you're going, okay, can you fly below the radar as a 2 seed? And I think that because of everything that has gone on at Bank of California Stadium this season and with everything that's gone on the road, this might be one of those times where as a 2 seed, you're kind of flying below the radar here just because everyone's focused on what's going on elsewhere. Seattle defensively for me has always, after Chad Marshall retired, there have been issues. Roman Torres was not around after his suspension. He's now back, and we can get into Roman Torres as a part of the X's and O's in just a little bit. But you look at their defensive issues, and people, I think, these days are more prone to point at flaws instead of pointing at success. And Seattle, 11-2-4 at home, number 2 in the Western Conference. So you sitting there, by default, you're an underdog with everything that LAFC has done for this season. But for me, they're a 2 seed that can come out fighting, because you sit there and you look at what Rui Diaz can do, what Ladero can do, and the offense is there. I still have a lot of questions when it comes to LAFC's defense, especially with what happened last round. So for me, I would sit there and say, yeah, you're there, but everybody's focused on the other side of things.
I was asking about the bigger picture, not just tomorrow, not just this season, not just the game. I'm talking about when we get into this conversation about big clubs and who are the big clubs. Atlanta is there. LAFC is there. I think Toronto is still there, although there were a lot of questions early on about spending. Seattle, I think they are. I always go back.
Why would you not?
Because they said so last year. That's what I'm trying to say. Garth Lagerwey last year said, the days of Seattle being the biggest spender in the league are probably behind us.
I remember that.
So that's what I'm getting at here. When you look at the mega clubs in Major League Soccer, where does Seattle rank? Are they a club that should be expecting to go to Banc of California and win, because that's what they are, that's what they do, they're that club? Or is this a mismatch? Is this 2 teams that one has passed the other one? I don't think
it's
is
a mismatch. No.
Well, no, LAFC is the favorite. Let's not try to play radio here. Like, they are the favorite.
No.
LAFC is 100% the favorite. They're the best team in the league this season. There's no question about any of that. Nope. Seattle is a team that has leaked goals at times this season. They've had problems defensively. Nico Ladero carries Seattle. If he doesn't have a big game, they're not beating LAFC, no question. That's where Seattle's at. If Carlos Vela doesn't have a big game, LAFC can still beat Seattle. Some of that's being at home. Some of that is just being a better team. And they are a better team right now. I'm not talking 1 year thing here. Because last year, you could say Seattle was the better team over LAFC on the field. I'm talking in general. Has LAFC come into this league and pass Seattle as and honestly pass the LA Galaxy too, because they haven't been there for a little while? Has LAFC become the biggest club in the Western Conference, and can Seattle do anything about it?
I would say yes to both. I mean, when it comes to on the field, yes, Seattle can do something about it. You've talked about that. And has LAFC surpassed Seattle and the LA Galaxy and Portland as a big club out west? I think the answer is yes. They had a philosophy. They came in. They wanted to do what they're doing, both on and off the pitch, when it comes to attracting eyes and all that kind of stuff and being the shiny object. So, yeah, I think that they have surpassed everybody out west in a very short period of time. Is it a mismatch on the field? I don't think it's a mismatch on the field because of recent results. But, yeah, when it comes to big clubs, I think LAFC is the number one out there. But I still think that Seattle, you look at Seattle, Galaxy, and Portland for me, they are big, but they've been passed by.
Well, recent results, LAFC's won 3 of 4 against Seattle. They've never lost to Seattle. The 2 games this season were back in April. We're going back a ways, and Seattle did not have their full complement of players. Raul Rui Diaz was injured for both. The second game in Seattle featured the Christian Roldan 20th minute red card, and Seattle got a 1-1 draw in that one. Pretty impressive result when you take that into consideration, but that's the first time they've gotten a result against LAFC. It's going to be a match where I feel like Seattle has to play their best match to survive it. I don't think they can survive without anything other than an A+ performance. I don't think they're that good enough to do it. Looking back at the game in LA, Christian Roldan said, LAFC did a really good job of repressing us, and we couldn't get out of that. I think there were a couple of goals that came out of that. Having the composure to dribble out, play out of the back, counter them where they are going to be susceptible is something we need to take advantage of and press them where we can. This makes me think, because Roldan said this in a couple different interviews in different ways, Seattle couldn't play out of the back at Bank of California Stadium. Not many teams can play out of the back against LAFC. It's been the recurring theme all season long. Seattle's also a team that has shown under Brian Schmetzer that they have no problems, no qualms about sitting back, being defensive, being negative, and just making the game ugly. If they're going to get past LAFC on the road, I think that's the only way they're going to do it. I just don't see them outplaying LAFC toe-to-toe.
No, and I know that a lot of us will look at LAFC and the Galaxy and sit there and say, well, see what the Galaxy did, and you look at the LAFC defensively and all that kind of stuff. But I would treat that as tape to view when you're looking at tendencies and not necessarily something that is a guidebook for knocking off LAFC. So yeah, I think this is going to be a mucker. It's going to be a grinder. It will not be 5-3 by any stretch of the imagination. If it is, then obviously I think that LAFC is going to be the team with the 5 as opposed to the 3. But yeah, I think that it's going to be one of those where we've seen Seattle in the past with Schmetzer, and it will not be the prettiest thing on television Tuesday night.
If they try to go for a 5-3 game, Seattle doesn't win. I just don't see any way they can do that, not with their defense being as frail as it is at times. Couple questions about that. Roman Torres, he had to leave the RSL game with a hamstring strain, mostly precautionary according to reports. He was at practice, he was participating, but not with the group. He was off to the side. He's day-to-day, and Brian Schmetzer said he'll do a little more each day, and we'll see if we can get him ready for Tuesday. I don't think he's starting. I just don't see a way that you're going to come out of a match with a hamstring strain early and less than a week later be able to go. I just don't see it, not this time of year. Bigger picture from Brian Schmetzer, he said that the Sounders don't have to win this to make a statement. He thinks, MLS Cup is the statement that's all that matters. He says it's a statement game in the sense that we want to go down there and undo the 4-1 result from April. He said it's not going to be a statement that makes Bob Bradley's career or my career or the Sounders' career. There's going to be a long history between franchises in MLS. We just want to go down there and make a statement that we're here to play and here to win. Seattle has been the measuring stick. I just wonder that if LAFC gets this done, who is going to be there with them? Because they become the new measuring stick. And I think if they get to the MLS Cup final, then they are that new measuring stick, no question about it. Who can push them as you start to look ahead? Seattle's going to have to upgrade their back line. The LA Galaxy have questions when it comes to Zlatan and what else they're going to do going forward. Portland, we'll get into it in the next segment. Merritt Paulson talking about upgrades that the Timbers are going to make. They're going to be in the market for upwards of 5 players to bolster their roster. But it feels like they're starting to be, in terms of overall quality in the West, there's starting to be a gap between LAFC and the rest. And the question has been, can LAFC win big games? I think they gave a partial answer against the Galaxy. It's a big game. It's not a big opponent because the Galaxy just weren't that great this year. But it's a big game and a big occasion. This is both. And this is, if it's not a statement for the Sounders, I think it's a huge statement game for LAFC that they are that team in the Western Conference, and all roads in the future to MLS Cup will go through Bank of California Stadium.
And I think that if the game ends up being one of those not so pretty games, and I'll phrase it that way, that if LAFC comes out on top of this one, they've shown that they can go lights out. They've shown that they can put, a goal difference of 48 out there and just play lights out soccer offensively. But if they win a game that doesn't fit their DNA, then I think that this is one of those opportunities for them to sit there and say, well, we've won games this way. We can now say that we've won games in a different way. And that it balances out what we've seen from LAFC, that they can win games in whatever situation is put in front of them. And so I think that it would be a statement for them as well that they can hang their hat on.
Tweet at us, share your thoughts on LA and Seattle. Tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. Let us know what you're thinking there. If you want to go ahead and make some early predictions or things that you're looking for, or questions you have about it, go ahead and fire them off. In the East, Toronto's headed to Atlanta this afternoon. They're training up in Toronto this morning. Yesterday, Josie Altidore worked out on the side. They're trying to get him available for Wednesday night. Trying being the key word. Omar Gonzalez is cleared to play. He was in the 18 against NYC. He ended up not being needed and didn't see the field. But Toronto is really desperately trying to get Josie Altidore back. When you look at what Toronto's done without him, they haven't played a typical front line because they've went to Alejandro Pozuelo as the plan B. The plan B has not been Patrick Mullins, who's more of a number 9, a replacement for Josie Altidore, although he plays it a little bit differently. Pozuelo as a false 9 is a completely different type of setup. It's been effective, but it has not been as effective as it would be with Altidore. Altidore on Friday had an injection, a PRP injection, a platelet-rich plasma injection. That's designed to aid in the healing of muscle, ligament, and tendon tears. So he's having this quad injury is what's keeping him out. I don't know timelines. I know nothing about PRP injections. I don't know how fast they can be effective, but they are, I think, they've probably even gotten past the idea of him being able to start on Wednesday. I think they want him available on Wednesday. If he's able to start, then I think you're going to see more people get PRP injections because that would be an impressive return. But if he's available, that would give them a different kind of look. And they've been able to do that with Patrick Mullins coming off the bench, and he's featured off the bench a lot as of late. But to have a player like Josie Altidore, to have a player who has been your top goal scorer for a number of years, it would be a huge boost to Toronto as they try to come in and pull the upset against Atlanta.
Yeah, to have that power forward up there, it's a different dynamic for Toronto entirely. And Nathan Pugh has a Josie question for us this morning. He said he saw that Josie was out running, quote unquote, yesterday. Can't see him starting on Wednesday. Don't think that possibility. And I don't think that possibility will influence Frank de Boer in his starting 11. However, would a 30-minute fit Josie sub change how Toronto approaches Wednesday?
I could. 30 minutes is a tricky one because you're going to have to make a decision on where you use it. And it's going to depend on how this game is going. Greg Vanney's going to have to get that right. If you've got him for 30, I mean, obviously you're not starting him. It's going to be Pozuelo up top. And I'm just assuming from their last few lineups without Altidore. And honestly, when Josie was available against Columbus, it was more of a simple shift. The last two without Josie, it's been a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, whatever you want to call it. We know what we're talking about at this point, I think. Back line of 4 has been consistent with Mauro, Mavinga, Simon, Alro. Omar Gonzalez will likely replace Simon, and you're back to your strongest back 4. Midfield of Bradley, Osorio, Delgado. Bradley and Osorio sit deeper. Delgado's in front of them. At NYC, it was Pozuelo in the middle with Benazet on one side, Endo on the other. Endo's been a surprise for Toronto as of late. Hard-working player, very scrappy, better on the ball than you think. He's created more chances than you would expect with his performances as of late. Benissette is one of the guys that they signed in the summer window who has been okay, but hasn't really completely hit yet. He's the guy who I think, if Altidor's able to come in, replaces Benissette, and Pozuelo moves over to the wing. That's where I think they'll go, but when do you do that? It's going to depend on his amount of time, and it's going to depend on how the match plays out, because if you're looking at, let's just say, the same lineup as Atlanta had against Philadelphia, the same lineup would be Pogba and LGP in the middle. You'd be putting Josie into that. Yeah, I mean, if you're Toronto and you want to get a little more direct, you like your matchups there. You like the battle between Josie and Pogba, two physical players. You think you might be able to get Pogba in some trouble. You might be able to get LGP in some trouble. And getting Pozuelo out wide could get him into a situation where you isolate him 1v1 with outside backs and or wingers. And that's a good look for Vanny. But you've got to figure out how you approach the match from the start. And that's the biggest question for me about Toronto is, do they come in and play defensively? Do they come in and throw a tactical curveball at you? They haven't in a while. They haven't went to 3 in the back in a while. It used to be something Greg Vanny did a good bit. Haven't seen it in a little bit. So is there anything you can do to pull a surprise? I don't know if there is. I mean, Altidore would be the biggest surprise if you're able to do it. If you wanted to start Mullins and drop Benissette to play Pozuelo out wide and get those 1v1s to start, okay, you're going to have to get, I think, a bigger performance from Patrick Mullins than you've generally seen from him. I think he's a talented player, but he's never quite lived up to his potential. Beyond that, I think Toronto is who they are at this point. It's down to the individual brilliance of a player like Pozuelo, potentially of a Josie Altidore. Osorio has dropped in deeper with Delgado being more of the playmaker there. Last year, it felt like Osorio was going forward a lot more. I think Osorio is helping to cover for Bradley's lack of mobility. It's still the same idea. They want to build up out of the back. They want to play through Michael Bradley. He's the fulcrum of their possession attack. But Osorio kind of does some of the running for him and becomes more of that 8, but sits deeper as needed. And I think he'll sit deep early on in Atlanta. I think Toronto tries to grow into the game. And if you know you have Josie Altidore as a 30-minute guy, I think you want to start very defensive. If you're Toronto, I think you want to start very conservative and have the game scoreless in that 60-minute mark, 75-minute mark, where you start to think, all right, one chance for Josie, and we're going to MLS Cup. But you've got to keep it tight. And the thing for Toronto that makes that really difficult is they haven't lost in 12. They've won 6 of those. They've drawn 6. But they've only had 1 clean sheet in that 12, which is a little surprising. I don't know if they can keep Atlanta off the board and keep the game tight enough. That's going to be the challenge for Toronto, is how can they get more defensive without sacrificing every chance to attack. It's a tough balance for Greg Vanny. I'm very intrigued to see what it looks like early on from him. Josie would be a nice bonus for them. I don't know, at the expected level of fitness that he would have, I don't know how much of an impact he's going to be on Wednesday. Unless it goes to extra time, and honestly, you're holding him for that. I mean, if it's one of those kind of deals, sure. We've seen it many times where you get that KG veteran who comes in extra time, and yeah, they might not be 100% fit, but they're fit enough, or they can catch you on a set piece, or they can catch you in a breakdown, in a moment of weakness, what have you. I don't think he's going to be able to do much more than that. So they're going to have to find a way for Pozuelo as that false 9 to exploit Atlanta's backline not having a lot of experience together. And one thing that does concern me when you look at this is Atlanta hasn't faced a team like Toronto who plays a false 9 I'm going to have to go back and look. It's been a long time since they've played a player in that role like Pozuelo would play it. That's tough because, I mean, the whole idea behind having a false nine is that they're not where you would expect the forward to be on a regular basis. They're dropping in deeper. That forces your center backs and your central midfield to have to be on the same page and pass him off, or you're going to have Pogba, because I think you're going to, if it's the same group, you're going to want LGP to sit deeper. You're going to have Pogba chasing Pozuelo. And that creates 1v1s in some tough spots. And if Pozuelo wins that 1v1, then you've got a problem because then one of your center backs is out of position. If Pogba passes him off to Jeff Larentowicz, then okay, they've got to make sure that they know, all right, he's in your zone, you've got him. All right, he's in my zone, I've got him. You've got to be on the same page with a false nine. Pozuelo's a crafty player. So it's a very different kind of challenge. I think for Toronto, you know, when you start to look ahead, you don't know what you're going to have when it comes to Josie. You want to keep the game tight. You want to give Pozuelo opportunities to make things happen. That's kind of what they did with NYC. It's not like they dominated NYC. They took advantage of 2 defensive mistakes. They want to give Pozuelo the chance to win it, and they want to add to the game as they go. You've seen Richie Larea come off the bench here lately. That's a big spark as a right back who loves to bomb forward. Auro will look for his opportunities to get forward. Morrow can get forward. It's a group in Toronto that positions interchange really frequently, but I think they're going to come in a defensive stance early and build into the game, grow into the game, and try to learn where the soft spots are going to be. But they've got to keep Atlanta off the board to do that. For Altidore to be a useful sub, for any of those things to happen, they've got to be very, very secure defensively, not get caught, and deal with probably the trio of Joseph Martinez, Ezequiel Barco, and Pity Martinez, which is going to be tough for any back line, let alone one with Omar Gonzalez coming back into the starting lineup after a hamstring issue. Chris Mavinga, who is a very good center back, but at times can get caught drifting. And Morrow and Auro at outside back, who are both good defenders, but better going forward. And Bradley and Osorio as your 2 central midfielders. Bradley is much better on the ball than without it, and Osorio is a better attacker than he is a holding midfielder. That's where Toronto is right now. They've got a lot of guys doing things that maybe aren't their best, but it works for the overall system. But without Josie, it's not quite the same system, so you get what Toronto has been. A team that has been difficult, pesky, not dominant, but good enough. And Atlanta needs to make sure that good enough isn't good enough. They have to make sure that Pozuelo can't hurt them because he's the kind of player who can win the match. He's a match winner. And you've got to make sure that he can't hurt you, and you've got to limit the rest. It's going to be interesting. We'll talk more about it as we go this week. That's on Wednesday, LAFC Seattle tomorrow. Some other news around the league. We're going to take a quick break and get you caught up on the happenings of a few teams who are not still playing. We'll be right back after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, October 28th. Getting ready for the conference finals around MLS, but other teams have things happening as well. Tab Ramos is your new manager of the Houston Dynamo, officially official. He's leaving the U20 national team program and going to Texas. I think it's a great hire.
Yep.
I think they need to have some patience, and Houston would appear to be a club that would. He's never managed a club team before. He's never managed day to day, and that's a little bit of an adjustment. I think he'll be okay. I think he'll bring young players through. I think Houston needs to get better at developing young players, and hopefully he can help with that as well. Although they have started to make some strides in that department, it's just maybe a year or two truly away from more homegrown players. But feels like a good hire, and I'm excited to see what Ramos can do as a club manager, because he appears to be one that his track record, what players have said about him, he appears to be one who could potentially down the road be a national team manager. I think he has that type of quality about him. But first, he needs to have some success at the professional level. Yeah,
and when I saw this, I was sitting there going, okay, that's a cool hire. Now I want to see how the Dynamo let him bring in his philosophy, see what the player ins and outs are going to be. And now that Tab has initially gotten the response that he's gotten on social media, I want to see the fan base come out, and I'd like to see more butts in the seats and more support for what's going on in Houston. So that for me are the next stages in all of this, is seeing.
Yeah, but I disagree that the coach is going to put butts in the seat.
No, I know. No,
Never
but what
happens.
I'm saying,
it's not going to change.
No, but with the personnel, hopefully that you bring them in, and the philosophy, and I know that winning always brings butts into the seats, but now that you've gotten this bump of Tab Ramos coming in the door, it's like, okay, now let's bring in the players, let's have a philosophy, and I'd like to see the fan base in Houston show up for a lot more than what they have done in the past, even though the product really, and you've made this point, and I would agree that they've never really recovered from the Owen Coyle situation. So just would love to see more butts in the seats in Houston, would like to see a more winning situation, and it's looking forward to seeing where it goes.
They were in the Western Conference Finals in 2017. They won the Open Cup last year. I don't even think it's just a winning thing. I think there's a couple different things they have to do. I mean, Houston has to make a decision on who they're going to be. Are they going to be a club that promotes from within and really embraces their community, and that's how they put butts in the seat, and it's going to have to be long-term. It's going to take time. Tab can help with that process. I think his commitment that you would expect to playing young players will definitely help with that. But the other side is, are they going to have to make a splashy signing to get people's attention? And they might. They might have to do that. You don't have to be one or the other totally, but it might take a splashy signing in the short term, followed up by the long-term community, be Houston's club kind of thing. Because I think the quality's been there. I don't even think it's just that, well, they haven't been winning, so people aren't showing up. People weren't showing up when they were winning towards the end. The end of the Dominic Kinnear stuff, the club felt just kind of stagnant, and then it got worse with Owen Coyle, and I think they did get away from their identity then. They need to rebuild their identity. They need to really embrace where they are in Texas. They need to embrace the Latino community in Houston. You see the fans that come out for Liga MX games when they're played between clubs in Houston. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a big duh. Like, you need to get on that and embrace it and do it right and do it authentically. And I hope that they can find that, because it's going to be a process. I mean, you might be able to bust through the process if you signed a Chicharito, for example, or someone along those lines. But it's going to be a process even if that happens. And DC United seeing that now. Like, they busted through that when they signed Wayne Rooney, and they got a bunch of attention, but it's fleeting. And has it really changed anything? I don't know. We'll find out this year. So Houston's got to make some big decisions on long-term what they do. They do have the right person leading the team on the field, though. I think Tab Ramos will be as successful as he can be with the Dynamo. Cincinnati, there's been a lot of talk about what that roster is going to look like next year. Really good piece by Tom Bogert at MLSsoccer.com. They've got 22 players under contract. That's the hard thing when you screw up your initial roster as an expansion team. Minnesota went through it a little bit, although they had a longer-term plan. Cincinnati is now dealing with it. You're not signing many guys year one on one-year deals. So you're kind of limited in what you can do. Nijkamp talked about maybe 5 players that they feel like they might be able to move and create some space. But it's not like there's a lot of players that you want to get rid of in that group that have a whole lot of value right now. Fernando Adi is one, for example, who has made it clear he's not happy. All kinds of disputes about, was he hurt? Was he not hurt? What was going on with all of this? I mean, you can't bring him back, but who wants him at this point? Right. So Cincinnati's kind of stuck for another year. And Nijkamp, it felt like he was saying that without saying it. That, yeah, there's only so much we can do. It's going to take a little bit of time. Merritt Paulson is not one who likes to take a little bit of time. He likes to do things quickly. And on the Timbers in 30 show out in Portland, he said, one, he wants to bring Diego Valeri back. He said there's a multi-year offer on the table, quote, pretty similar to his current situation. Still be the highest paid Timbers player. He said this, though, but we also have to work within the realities of the MLS cap structure. It's important that we had to have flexibility, and we have flexibility with the DP spot. I'm cautiously optimistic. He wants Valeri, he wants Diego Chara to have the opportunity to retire as Portland Timbers if they want to. He wants to keep them in town. But he said they are looking at 5 players. He mentioned a promising right back. He mentioned center back. He mentioned central midfield. He mentioned a scoring threat at right wing, and he mentioned a forward. He said they're a little thin up top. So the right wing one sounds like maybe the biggest outlay of resources to go get. Giovanni Savarese, Gavin Wilkinson are in Europe scouting right now. I guess they're going to be back and speaking to the media here shortly. Kind of an end-of-the-season Timbers roundtable deal. But Portland underperformed this year. Paulson kind of hinted at it in the interview that there were more things going on that made it more complicated than people know publicly. And, okay, I mean, I take him at his word. I don't know what they are. I mean, they're not public, so we don't know. But he expressed confidence in Giovanni Savarese. I think anybody who was, calling for Savarese to go is a little foolish. I think he's the right guy for the Timbers, and I think they do need to upgrade that roster a bit. They didn't really address some of the issues that we looked at coming out of 2018, where they got to the Cup final, but they weren't good enough to get it done. There's the right wing threat up top. It took a while to get Brian Fernandez. They eventually did. They've got to get better, and as we talked about in the first segment, you've got LAFC, who now is setting the bar pretty high. Can the Timbers be a team that can be in that conversation? I think everything off the field is yes. You've got a great stadium, you've got a great fan base, very invested. All of that is great. can you put together the roster that is good enough to compete with a team like LAFC that's going to spend big money? Can the Timbers be right there? And Savarese feels like the manager who can do it, but you got to give him a little bit more to work with.
Yeah, and I want to see. I want to see really how I want to see how their scouting success is. I know that they're going to have some guys that are going to be on a piece of paper circled or highlighted, and I want to see how attractive. And Portland should be an attractive place for folks. And I'd love to see who they're going to bring in, and I want to see
how attractive is Portland in the grand scheme of things.
Well, I think it's
tricky.
Yeah, and I think that what you have to do is find that player who wants to be a builder. You know, we talk about coaches who are builders, and they're the ones who want to sit there and say, okay, here's a situation. I want to improve on this situation and be a part of something from that base level where you try to improve something. You're going to be finding players who are hungry. You're going to be finding guys who might be in a situation overseas or wherever they find them where they're going to match the DNA of a Giovanni Savarese. And they may not necessarily be household names to a lot of folks, but they're going to be those builder type of personalities that you're going to be looking into when it comes to this next wave of folks that they want to bring into Portland, I think.
Yeah, that's what's kind of interesting when you compare Portland and Atlanta. I think both with the fan bases they have, you don't need a household name. It's a nice bonus if the right fit happens, but it's not something you have to go do. Like Houston, I think they need a household name to change the idea of who the Houston Dynamo are. Portland doesn't need that. Atlanta doesn't need that. They can make people into stars. Diego Valeri has become a star in Portland because of his time with the Timbers. Same with Diego Chara. We've seen it here in Atlanta from day one. It's a different fit, and Atlanta is showing that you can go that route and become a mega club. Portland is going to have some limitations just based off the city, just based off the size and based off where they are, but they can be a club that gets that just below level of household name. They can get a player who wants to play for that fan base, that wants to play in that environment, that wants to be part of a historic club. But maybe your bright lights, big city guys are not going to be as interested. And that's okay. I don't know if they would fit in Portland anyway. But it does put a little bit of a limitation on how big you can go with some of these signings. The scouting has to be top-notch. Uriel Antuna, who is with the LA Galaxy on loan from Manchester City. That loan's up at the end of the year. Antuna said he's happy in Los Angeles, but now his performances have gotten a lot of attention. Benfica has shown an interest. I don't think he's coming back. If there's a bigger club that will play him, I think he's gone. And if Benfica will take him to play him on loan from Manchester City, then it's a different conversation. If he would just go to be part of the roster, he might stay because he is happy in Los Angeles. So keep an eye on that one. If you lose him, that's a big piece you've got to replace. A couple other off-the-field topics that have popped up before we get into the Twitter timeline. Pablo Maurer of The Athletic had a piece about Kevin Durant, NBA star, who's twice tried to buy a stake of DC United. He's originally from that area, and he's expressed an interest in investing in MLS. We've seen James Harden do that in Houston. I think you're going to see this more and more and more. But, you're talking big sports names who are wanting to invest their money in something that they think, I think they have an affinity for the sport and they like the sport, but they also like their money and they want to make more of it. And they're seeing this as a good investment. And
it's seeing what Harden has attached himself to in Houston. Yeah, I'm hoping that Jason Levy and et al. Would like to listen to Kevin Durant and see what he has to say, because opportunities like this, there are going to be more and more athletes who I think will be gravitating toward the sport to want to be an investor / owner and a diversification of portfolios, the stuff that you were just talking about. When you have a sport that is viewed as up and coming when it comes to both its place in the country and its place in the financial footprint for a growth market, it's very, very smart for athletes to do this. You just hope that for Kevin Durant, that Jason Levian will pick up the phone.
Well, I mean, we don't know the details. I don't want to jump to that conclusion that you're dodging Kevin Durant's calls and you don't want his money. He might not be offering enough. It is a business for Levian as well. You don't want to just, okay, cool. Kevin Durant, yeah, we'll give you the friends and family discount on buying a share of the team. No, I mean, you got to make money. So let's wait and see how that shakes out. New York City Stadium, maybe. The Outfield is a news and opinion site that covers the Pigeons. Chris Campbell wrote a breakdown of kind of where things stand in the South Bronx. We've talked a lot about Queens, but it looks like the Bronx could be where this ends up, and that's where they had originally started working. It's a little south of the Yankee Stadium area. There's lots of things happening under the surface right now when it comes to exit ramps on highways and parcels of land moving around and things like that. And there's also things about soccer stadiums or proposed soccer stadiums that are starting to pop up in neighborhood NPU type of meetings. So maybe there's something happening. I mean, this is where they almost had a deal done before they started playing. There was nearly a deal done in 2014. It fell apart at the last minute. Got to get something going. And they've asked for patience. They've said that they're making progress. I'm assuming this is where they've been making progress. Now it's starting to come public. I'll be curious to see if and when the team is able to say anything about it, because this is good news. And I think the things that Chris Campbell points out at the Outfield, good news.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a bright light for you here if you're a New York City fan and you've been frustrated about playing at Yankee Stadium or Citi Field when you can't play at Yankee Stadium. This should be a good thing, and hopefully it is. I get the cautiousness, but hopefully it gets to the point soon where they can start to talk about this publicly.
Yeah, and for me this morning, it was, okay, where specifically is this in relation to Yankee Stadium? And it's only a handful of blocks. It's like 8 blocks away from Yankee Stadium, just southwest of there. So it's in the quote-unquote ballpark, pardon the pun, this early in the morning when it comes to proximity to Yankee Stadium and all that kind of stuff. So your fan base isn't being, strewn from one borough to the other like we've seen before. But if the Gal site, and for those of you that have some time this morning, go ahead and read the piece. And it's a good breakdown of where things stand. But 8 blocks away from Yankee Stadium, and if all of these pieces are put together, it's steps in the right direction to finally getting an end to what we've been talking about far too much.
Theoutfield.org is the site, and it's the newest piece on the site. So go check that out. It feels like things are starting to come into the right combination to get progress happening here, but it's complicated. I get it. I understand the challenges in New York City of building anything. So hopefully they get all their ducks in a row before it's time to bring something to the fore. What do we have on the Twitter timeline, John? Let's get into that before we wrap up hour number 1.
Caleb Wright, if Atlanta United gets to MLS Cup and wins it, it would probably suggest that they are one of the greatest MLS clubs of all time due to the fact they won 4 cups.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it would. You can talk about this in a few different ways. I'm not going to say that Atlanta United's accomplished more than the LA Galaxy have. The LA Galaxy have been around since 1996. But in a time frame of a couple of years, yeah, this is as good as it's been, even without MLS Cup. I mean, that's the other thing, is take that out of it for right now. You're still talking about top 10, top 5 or 6 3-year runs, and these are the first 3 years of the club. So that's a big deal. You don't become the biggest club, the most legendary, the most successful club in 3 years, though. So I would say be respectful of especially the teams that helped start this, and include Chicago in it because they were just 2 years later. They had to do things that Atlanta United didn't have to live through. They had to survive through times when the league was struggling. They had to handle things in a very different way. Atlanta's been able to take advantage of the things that the original clubs did early on. But on the field in a 2-3 year period, this is about as good as it gets. You've only had 3 repeat champions of MLS Cup in the league. You've had very few who have won trophies like the MLS Cup, Supporters Shield, U.S. Open Cup in back-to-back years. Atlanta's got 2 of those. You throw a Campeones Cup into it, which is, yes, a one-game deal, but it's still a international trophy. You have the LA Galaxy who won CONCACAF when it was the CONCACAF Cup. You have DC United who won that. We're going back to 98 and 2000 for those. And you've got DC United who won an Inter-American Cup that used to be played between the CONCACAF Champions Cup winner and the Copa Libertadores winner. DC United won that in 1998. So you have a few things to compare this to, but not much. And that's even without MLS Cup. You win back-to-back MLS Cups and throw an Open Cup into it. Yeah, it's as good as it gets in a short period of time.
Shiva wanted to know what the difference between this Toronto team and the one that came to the Benz and Atlanta United was able to totally dominate them, assuming Josie does not play.
Well, they didn't play most of their players in that game, first off. That was the game where, if you remember, they were in Orlando the weekend before, and they heavily rotated their squad before going back home to then lose to the Philadelphia Union. We talked about the preemptive squad rotation that kind of bit Greg Vanney in that one. So let's see. Bradley played. I'm looking at other potential starters. He might be the only one who starts on Wednesday that started in that match. Morrow and Osorio came off the bench. Auro, Mavinga, Delgado were on the bench unused. Westberg hadn't grabbed the starting spot by this point. It was a makeshift lineup, so you can't really compare a lot of it. Toronto was pretty bad that day because you're counting on a teenager up top in Akinola, Jay Chapman, Nick DeLeon, Pozuelo was in the lineup then. He had just come to the team a month before that, and he didn't play well in this match. So you've added since then, when you look at what your lineup could be, you've added Omar Gonzalez. You have added Benissette. You've brought Endo back into the team, and he's added a lot. So it's a much better team. I don't think you can take much out of that game at all. You can't take a whole lot out of the game in Toronto either, because you were missing Joseph Martinez from that one. Both teams were missing pieces due to international duty. So this is kind of a match. It's a little hard to compare to the earlier matches this season. I think LA and Seattle's kind of the same thing.
Daniel Price on his #Overreaction Monday says, I don't want to be overcritical when it comes to the U17s. They're just kids, but man, did it fall apart for them against Senegal. It's a good learning experience for them and the manager. Hopefully it looks better and they make it out of groups.
Yeah, welcome to the U17s. I mean, that's what happens. You're talking about 15, 16, 17-year-olds. So you're going to see mistakes. You're going to see players who struggle with the sense of the occasion. You're going to see players who struggle when they're pressed. You can't look too deeply at the U17 World Cup, because even players who star in it don't necessarily make it big. That happens quite often. So you can't get too deep into it. I saw people getting worked up about identity. There was no identity. It's a team of teenagers. There's no identity. Forget identity. there's nothing to even think about when it comes to that. It's pick the best group, see how they respond to situations, and you move on from there. It's not to say that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter as much as I think people read into it sometimes. U20s matter a little bit more, but still, that's not the greatest barometer either. Plenty of players have been a star at the U20 World Cup and didn't make it much past that. U17s, that's an even larger percentage of players who look great there and don't make it, or guys who don't look great there and then do make it. The things about this U17 group that you do hang your hat on, you've got more professionals than you've ever had, which you've never had a team of all professionals, all players from professional clubs, and now you've got that. I mean, not that long ago, you were pulling kids from youth clubs who were coming into this, not youth clubs attached to pro clubs, just youth clubs. That happened a lot. So there's been progress. It's a better level, but the rest of the world makes progress too. I don't think you can read too much into identity, style of play, tactics. You can't. It's the U17s. Like, it is. You're looking for individuals. You're looking to see how they respond to things. That's generally where I'm at. So now, all right, what does the lineup look like in game number 2? Do they handle? If they get an early lead, do they handle that better? Or if the other team starts to grow into it and grab momentum, can they change it? Which players respond positively in those moments? Those are the things you're looking for here. Bigger questions when it comes to the youth national teams is now with Tab Ramos gone, what does that look like? Because the only full-time coach you have at the youth national team level at the moment is the U17 coach, Rafael Vicky. That's it. You don't have a U20 coach now because Tab was there. You have a U23 coach in Jason Kreis, who now is reportedly being interviewed for a GM manager position at RSL, returning back there. He's also got a full-time gig with Miami at the moment, so something's got to give. U15s, U14s, U19s. Brad Friedel had the U19 group before he went to New England. That was a while ago. What is the big picture? Because from an identity standpoint, these players' identities are forged at their club. The national team identity is set by your technical directors, by your first team, senior team, and then trickles down. But your U17 group doesn't look exactly like your senior group because it can't. You're asking kids to play like seasoned professionals. That doesn't happen. But can you see glimpses of it? Can you see the basic ideas? That stuff takes time and it takes people. And U.S. Soccer's got to get people hired and get people in these positions to be able to do those things. Because otherwise you've got a team of very good young players who are trying to figure out how to be a team and how to deal with these situations and just deal with it individually and deal with it as a group. It's not easy. Hopefully we see a better performance in the final 2 games and they get out of the group stage. You get crazy things that happen at the U17 level, the U20 level as well. So don't put too much stock into it, but you do want to see progress in the tournament, and that's what we hope to see in game number 2. Let's take a break. We're going to come back. Jessica Charman joins us on the other side. We're going to talk NWSL championship from yesterday. The North Carolina Courage are your back-to-back champions. They have talked about setting a bar. It's been the recurring theme today. They have set the bar in the women's professional game. How can others get there? What does it look like that's on the horizon for the NWSL? We'll talk to Jess about all of that right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, Soccer Down Here. October 28th, MLS Conference Championship Week is upon us. NWSL Championship Week has ended with the North Carolina Courage slamming the door shut on anyone trying to take their title. They won 4-0 yesterday. Dominant performance over the Chicago Red Stars. We're going to talk to Jessica Charman right now about that one and about the NWSL as a whole, because there was a lot of interesting things that came out of North Carolina this weekend. How's it going, Jess?
It's going good, thank you. Looking forward to recapping on women's soccer. It's been a while since the Women's World Cup, so about time we talked about it.
Yeah, I saw people say after this win and after the Courage showed their quality that this is the best women's professional team in the world. Now, we don't have a World Club Cup. FIFA, get on it. We had the International Champions Cup, and last year the Courage won that. This year they lost to Lyon. But they looked like as good of a team as you're going to find yesterday in a final, just completely dominating the Chicago Red Stars.
Yeah, they're absolutely fantastic. I mean, when you break down their roster, pretty much everyone in the starting lineup is a full international. And I read some funny stuff about how if you could duplicate the players on that team to play the U.S. women's national team, you wouldn't know who would win. It was one of those games where they showed so much maturity and just dominated the game. There was a shaky couple moments in the first 2 or 3 minutes where it looked like Chicago might find an opportunity, but after that, it was all North Carolina, really.
Just the word that comes to mind for me in looking at the North Carolina performance was relentless. You looked at what they did. It started with the stuff in the box to get that first goal on the board in the 4th minute, and the Courage just kept coming and coming and coming. It's like there was no break. There was no change in gears. It was just the gas pedal was down for an entire 90 minutes, and you ended up with the result that you had.
Yeah, completely. It was full throttle, nonstop from the go, like you said, and they responded in the most positive way possible. There was talk before the game, obviously, in regular season, Chicago didn't lose to North Carolina. They won twice, tied once. So it was one of those games where I think North Carolina had something to prove. They weren't the underdog. I know there's some discussion about them being the underdog. You can't call the Supporters' Shield winner an underdog. That's ridiculous in my mind. But maybe Chicago was a bit of their Achilles heel during the season. So this was their chance to really prove that they're a dominant force. And as you know, in American sports, at the end of the day, it's the playoff championship that means the most, and they weren't going to be content with just the Supporters' Shield.
It's tough when you look at this game because the Courage get 2 pretty early. We were texting back and forth about it, and it's like, okay, if Chicago can just get to halftime, what do they have to change things up? I don't really know, but they got to get to halftime. Then they give up the 3rd one, and that pretty much ended it. It just felt like there were no answers. And this North Carolina team was so balanced that they're able to bring Hamilton off the bench, who was one of their leading scorers, McCall Zerboni off the bench, who probably should have been with the U.S. women's national team this summer. It's not just a good 11, it's a deep squad overall. And they have stars, but they don't have the mega household names that some other clubs do in this league.
No, and I agree with that completely. I think Chicago struggled with the conditions a little bit. There was a lot of emphasis on how it felt like 88 degrees or something like that on the field. North Carolina, obviously, a little bit hotter at this time of the year than Chicago. And Chicago just looked deflated and exhausted by about 40 minutes. And it was that third goal that was kind of the nail in the coffin. I thought Ertz didn't have a very good game. I thought Nair made some good saves, but her and Ertz just didn't look like they had played together before. And that's so ridiculous for two people that play for the national team together, that have so much experience under their belt as a goalkeeper center-back duo. And there was so many errors in communication, Ertz calling for Nair to come out, getting in each other's way. And the two of them will look back and think that they really could have prevented a couple of those goals happening. And the third goal just looked like tired legs, tired minds, and almost like some players that look like they'd given up already. And you can't afford to do that. And when you have a player like Sam Kerr playing for you, you seem to think that you're always going to get that opportunity to get on the scoreboard. And I thought Kerr was very underwhelming with the couple of opportunities that she did get in front of net.
We've got a lot of questions from Katie Weaver this morning. Some of them we've already kind of addressed a little bit here, Jess. Katie admits that she hasn't watched as much NWSL as she'd like this year, wanted to know if it was a fair result and if the Courage were that much more dominant. We've kind of talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was a fair result. We can't say anything other than that. Chicago, like we said, I was very disappointed. And I told you guys off air how disappointed I was, because when you looked at the season and you looked at the two semifinal matchups, I thought it was going to be a lot closer. And when there's the blowouts in the final, it's always disappointing, but you can't say it wasn't a fair blowout.
And then she wanted to know if it was good for the league to have such disparity.
And I think the thing is, it was disparity in this one game. But I think Jason will mirror me that throughout the season, it wasn't so much disparity. Before the game, you wouldn't have predicted a result like that. I just think one team showed up on the day prepared and ready to go, and the other team showed up and didn't perform in the quality that we would have expected.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, the Courage over the last 3 years, they've won the Shield each of the last 3 years, and they've had that type of dominance, but they're not doing it in the way that you typically see, because you get into this conversation when it comes to MLS. Usually it's down to spending. It's down to, all right, who's spending a lot on designated players, who's able to spend a lot on a transfer fee but have a player on a manageable number, those types of things. North Carolina, when you look at superstars, you're not seeing those players that would be commanding those huge dollars. It's not like Steve Malik is outspending everybody. He went out and got Debinha, who is an unbelievable player. Debinha really looks like the heir apparent to Marta and Brazil. But Jess McDonald, Crystal Dunn, Sam Mewis, Abby Dahlkemper, you're getting a bunch of national team players, but not the big-name national team players. So in general, no, I think you want to see a very competitive league structure, and you want to see teams challenge the Courage, but they've done it out of doing it the right way. So
yeah, you're not feeling resentful towards them for going out and spending money, or you look at Orlando when they had Marta and Alex Morgan, or you had Rapinoe
and Sydney Leroux. I mean, you're talking about like a group in Orlando that, how are they not scoring enough goals to get into the postseason?
It's shocking, isn't it?
Before Leroux stepped away with pregnancy, but and Morgan will now, so Orlando might have some challenges going forward.
Yeah, they've suddenly lost their superstars, but it's one of those.
But they didn't deliver before.
Exactly, and you look at who makes it, and it's actually a really positive sign, I think, that it's not those teams that have just spent money or attracted those big names that are doing well. It's teams that are well coached, well recruited, And he just picks 11 players that work well together and act like a team. Sometimes I feel like when you have a superstar, and you saw it with DC United with Wayne Rooney sometimes, you adapt the game so much to suit that superstar on your team that then as a cohesive 11, you don't look as good together.
Exactly. I want to get into it a little bit about the way Paul Riley plays, because it's a little unique among top teams. He really goes with the box midfield. It's a 4-2-2-2, but it's
when you look at when you see
fluid.
the graphic, how weird is the graphic in the startup?
You just don't see many teams do this anymore. But when you have the player, you have the back line that is as good as it gets in this league. Jayleen Henkel on the left. You have Heather O'Reilly playing as a right back in her final match and doing the job that's needed. Dahlkemper and Ursig are as good of a center back pairing as you're going to get. But then you have a fluid front six, honestly, because how many times did we see Jess McDonald drift out wide or Lynn Williams drift out wide? Crystal Dunn tucking inside. Debinya's everywhere. And O'Sullivan and Mewis are the base for all of it. It's a really creative, I think, perfect fit for the talent that Paul Riley has. And it's something that doesn't just click in overnight. You have to work on that a lot to make sure you have the proper balance.
And that's the word. The key word is balance. And I don't think Chicago could handle the unpredictable way that the front six were moving. When you look at the goals and you look at the wing play, you look where Debino is, you look where McDonald is on the field, they can't hang with the different runners. And I was somewhat critical on McDonald's goal because I thought that she just drifted in. She had two defenders around her. I think Ertz might have been one of them. And she was able to head that in because the two defenders couldn't track. But you don't give enough credit to those players that are pulling or confusing the defenders by making other runs. And it's so hard when you have so many different dangerous players in the 18-yard box out wide because you don't know who to concentrate on stopping getting the ball.
Let me go to goal number 4 and the ball that Dahlkemper served. And there are just moments when you're looking at the North Carolina Courage, and to me that was one of them, where you just kind of sit there and you just tip your hat and you go, yep, and the end result is the end result. But it's at times you just sit there and you're kicked back in your chair and you go, yep, that's the thing of beauty. You tip your hat and you move on. It's just this team had a lot of those moments.
Yeah, the service was spectacular. I mean, she couldn't have weighted that ball more perfectly. And the reason that Nair comes out for it and tries to get the punch on the ball is because the weight of the pass is so to a T. It's in that zone where the goalkeeper knows they're going to have to try and come to it because it's over the defenders. It was over, I believe, again, so I feel like I'm criticizing her a lot on her defensive plays towards goals, but the deflected header by Mewis is perfect. That's not an easy one to score. And what I like about the Courage's goals is all 4 of them were very different. They showed that they can be direct. They showed that they have individual talent. They showed that they're relentless and they're not going to give up on lost balls. I mean, several of the goals looked like Chicago were going to clear it, but it was just that unstoppable mind that we're not going to take our foot off the gas that powered them through to net.
All right, let's get into the off-the-field side of things because there's news there, too. Louisville will be coming into the league in 2021 in their new stadium that will also house Louisville City of the USL Championship. Lots of reports, and Grant Wall had a big one ahead of the match yesterday, that Sacramento will be coming in next season as part of their whole push where they come into MLS in 22, but they come into NWSL next year and continue along with their USL Championship team. And, oh, yeah, Grant Wall just dropped a little bit of a nugget that Atlanta United is still continuing along their fact-finding mission and are planning for 21, but there's still, a few things up in the air. And the big one that Wall mentioned was the relationship between U.S. Soccer and the NWSL. U.S. Soccer has managed the NWSL since its inception, and that contract is up at the end of this year. And there's a few different things that make it sound like, one, they're looking for a commissioner. They are talking about how they're going to handle salaries going forward. It sounds like the NWSL will be more autonomous, but maybe not completely step away from the relationship with U.S. Soccer. And Wall kind of hinted that Atlanta was waiting to see how all that shakes out.
Yeah, I like the interview on ESPN. Amanda Duffy, the president, came on at halftime and said a few words about NWSL, how grateful she is for the growth they've seen over the last 7 years, that she was very careful about praising U.S. soccer's role, but also pretty clear in the fact that she does want to try and distance themselves in an appropriate manner. And I don't blame them. They need to have a differentiation. You can't be relying on U.S. soccer to be the main controller, and it's important to be able to make changes and adjustments because there is a difference in the needs of the women's league and so on and so forth. And I think the salary and changing the way they deal with salaries is the most important thing that needs to be altered. Particularly, Sam Kerr's a great example of it in the case of international players, because as the leagues in Europe and even across the world are developing, NWSL needs to try and keep the best talent they can in order to be a competitive league when you compare it to other nations.
And Jess, at the same time, you're talking about a league who I know a lot of us would have liked for them to capitalize on momentum going into a Women's World Cup. But now, even more so, you have to capitalize on the momentum coming out of the Women's World Cup, having a championship run like you have with a team like the North Carolina Courage, and now trying to take those next steps. So this is a key time over and over again, it seems, for the NWSL right now.
Yeah, it's vital because the U.S. women's national team obviously deserved winners of the World Cup, as much as it pains me to say that as an English woman. But now's the time. We saw in the World Cup, and Jason and I on the Women's World Cup show emphasize that the rest of the world is getting better and they're catching up. And a lot of that reason for that is because of the growth of the domestic leagues and the investment in the domestic leagues. And the U.S. has 4 years now, and there's going to be a lot of changes across the world in 4 years. And they want to be able to catch up and also ride that wave and not be ashamed to ride the wave of popularity. And women's soccer has always been big in the U.S., but I feel like this World Cup attracted more people that maybe in the past were reluctant to embrace the women's game. There are a lot of people on my Twitter timeline who openly admitted that they'd never really watched women's soccer before this World Cup, that they were, or what they had watched, they were kind of disappointed about the quality. This World Cup shook all their expectations, and now more people will be willing to watch the NWSL. More people are engaged in it. And I mentioned to Jason, I was a little bit disappointed with the venue, and I understand it needed to be a home venue for the championship game. It was a sellout, but I think it was less than 11,000 people that were able to attend the game, and I don't think that's right for the NWSL. I think that championship game deserved a bigger sellout crowd.
That's what's tough is I remember the one a couple of years ago that was in Orlando, and Orlando didn't qualify, and it was 4,000 people, and it looked really bad. This felt small, but at least a step in the right direction. I mean, Portland has shown that they will turn up if the Thorns are in it or if they're not. But you can't always have the championship game in Portland. It's something that's going to take a little bit of time. And honestly, it's why I think you should go to a 2-leg final, because then you get a game in each home venue and you can build it that way. I don't know.
I would like that.
Yeah, I think it's a better way to determine the champion, but I think it's also better from a marketing standpoint. But there's a lot of possibilities for the NWSL going forward. A lot of possibilities for the U.S. Women's National Team going forward. And I think they do dovetail at times. We were getting into it a bit because one of the other tidbits that Grant Wall dropped in his huge piece ahead of the game yesterday was that Vlatko Andonovski appears to be the coach for the U.S. Women's National Team, just waiting for this to be official at this point. But one player reportedly that he would like to bring in is Alana Cook, who could play for England, could play for the U.S., hasn't been capped by either. She plays for PSG. And we saw it at this World Cup, the U.S. Women's National Team, every player played in the NWSL. I don't think that's going to be the case going forward, and I think that's a good thing in general, even if the NWSL starts spending more money and offering better salaries. It's still good when players find the right club that fits them, and it might not be in this league.
Yeah, and it's it's not a negative thing. When I was reading through the Twitter comments, I was a little bit disappointed. They thought that Alana Cook maybe doesn't deserve to play for the U.S. women's national team because she's chosen to go play abroad and she's not supporting the domestic league back home. But for me, it's actually raising the profile of the U.S. women's game by going to play for a team like PSG, by traveling across the world to go represent the U.S. in other leagues and growing that challenge and also making the decision that's right for the player. There's no point staying in NWSL if you're going to get paid more and treated in a better way in a different team, or you're going to get more game time in a different team. There was a while back in England, probably 12, 13 years ago, when our domestic league wasn't doing very well, that all the players wanted to do was go off to the US, do the soccer scholarship, and see what sort of professional contract could follow after that. There was a time where the coach didn't want to recruit players that went to the US because they thought that they were sort of harming the domestic league back home. But that just harmed the English national team because you weren't getting the best players. I think you have to recruit whoever's the best player for the job. And you don't see that in the American national team. You're not complaining about calling up Pulisic. You're not complaining about calling up Sargent just because they've gone.
You're telling players to leave MLS. Is what the
exactly.
general is people are trying to play.
So if that's one mindset, that it's a positive thing for the U.S. men's players to go off and go to the teams that suit their style of play or will give them the best experience, it shouldn't be an issue on the women's side because, let's be honest, both MLS and NWSL are growing leagues that are trying to stamp their authority on the rest of the world.
There were a couple bullets in all of this that jumped out to me about it. So Alana Cook's contract with PSG reportedly 5 times the size of the one she was being offered in the NWSL.
Yeah,
so no brainer.
Shocking.
You're going to say no, you're going to say no to that.
Yeah, that shows you that the NWSL has to figure out something about their salary structure, because this is where it gets complicated with U.S. Soccer. U.S. Soccer has paid their national team players a salary, probably said, okay, if you're going to be on a salary from us, you're going to play here, and then also that means you're going to play for the national team. So you kind of get your spot and you keep your spot. It's a difficult thing overall, and as you see more young American players decide to go to Europe because there's more money, you're going to have to change that from a national team perspective, and you're going to have to pay more with the NWSL, and owners are going to have to invest more, whether it's a Sam Kerr, which Chicago wants to keep her, and their owner, Arnim Whistler, thinks that he's going to be able to do that and make a competitive offer with changes to this new structure. But you also have to pay domestic players who maybe aren't those national team players. You're going to have to pay them more, or they're going to go to PSG or Lyon or to the Women's Super League or wherever.
And the thing is, you can turn your nose up in the men's game at players that maybe go over to China for a paycheck, or they go play in the Australia League because the standard of soccer that they're going to be playing is decreased. But in the women's game, that's not the case. When they're going over to play in the French league, when they're going over to play in the English league, they're getting as good of a soccer experience as they would in America. So it's not like they're just going for the money. Obviously, money is a huge incentive, and particularly when it's such a disparity. I mean, the 5 times is just unbelievable to me. But it's not just about the money. It's about the equal, if not better, more competitive level of soccer and increased support. We talked about in the men's side, Monone moving from the English league where he wasn't getting to play and wasn't getting any fan base really supporting him, over to Minnesota where he has a sellout crowd a lot of the time. They're actually probably getting more supporters playing in Europe than they were in USA as well.
So when you look at this, I mean, it's the double standard that we're seeing here. It's incredibly disappointing because we bring up the idea of a Pulisic and a Sargent, and then it's not okay. But and getting past this double standard, I think, is just as important here, and understanding the financial dynamic as well as the on the field dynamic and all of this, and wanting to grow the game, not just in Europe, but here in the United States, and the exposure of all of these players too.
Yeah, absolutely. double standards are a part of life, and those who are more knowledgeable, without being disrespectful, understand that, the female players are making the best decisions for their career and their lives. But at the same time, it is just an obstacle that is going to have to be overstepped if the women's game is going to grow both here and across the world. And if you're a fan of the women's game, your priority really is trying to make the game grow across the world as a whole and make events like the World Cup more competitive than ever. It's not just about, you can't be so focused on just the US game. You have to be focused on the game as a whole, because if the whole game in the world grows and has more competitiveness, then that actually benefits the US too.
It's an interesting time for the NWSL, but I agree with Allie Wagner, who tweeted this last night. I was kind of having this feeling going into it. I was with John. I worried that the league was too slow to capitalize on the World Cup because they didn't do anything ahead of it. But it does feel like, and it's a combination of all of it, with the World Cup title, with the attendance going up but staying up, which was the important part. It didn't just get a momentary blip. Like teams like Sky Blue are drawing. Chicago drew really well at SeatGeek Stadium in Bridgeview. You're seeing changes, and it feels like this is the jump off. We talked about it all summer with the World Cup. It felt like this was the jump off for the women's game worldwide. It feels like the jump off point for the NWSL as well going forward. If you get to 16 teams in 3 years, and you're getting top-level sponsors, and you get a top-level TV deal, I think you're in a great spot, and you're not going backwards anytime soon.
Yeah, consistency is key, and I think when I moved here, there was always a sort of taboo around the Women's Professional League. It's come up a couple of times, it's struggled and failed, and there's always that anticipation or nervousness around the female professional game that maybe it's destined to have that decline, but right now, I think it's about making it sustainable and making it consistent. And that's what it's starting to look like. When you look at I believe it's Budweiser deal, Yahoo is about to end, but ESPN did some great coverage, both on regular ESPN and ESPN Deportes. There was great coverage in Spanish and in English. And that's a really good sign. And should they come on and have an extended deal, I'm sure they will, with the likes of ESPN Plus, their online
There's talk
platform.
about NBC possibly as well. There's actually a lot of rumors about NBC and potentially like piggybacking on some of the Premier League coverage with somebody like Rebecca Lowe being very involved.
Yeah, and that would be brilliant. And we like that. I remember us talking in the past about how on the Latin American coverage, a lot of time the women's coverage is intertwined with the men's games, or the highlight reels are back to back with the men's game. And that's something that the US needs to look at when they have these merged teams that are connected to the men's team. Maybe you sometimes do the games that are back to back to try and encourage the fans. It's done in the college game all the time, double headers. Maybe that's something that works to encourage more fans or more interest, because in the Women's Super League in England, for instance, season ticket holders for one team are often offered free season tickets for the women's team. And you want to encourage your fans to support both teams because they are one.
Exactly. It's all about the overall game, and I don't think it has to be two separate worlds like it's been for way too long in the U.S. And I think other countries are starting to realize that, hey, if you are River Plate and you are now, operating a professional women's team as the league in Argentina has gone professional, it kind of makes sense to play off of the name value of the River Plate brand. Use it and use your fan base to kickstart your women's program. It's a good thing.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes, and we talked about it, I know it's to do with the naming rights or whatever, MLS and NWSL, those sort of differences with the names, the Thorns, the Timbers, sometimes it can have a counteractive effect.
Yeah, I think Portland's done the best job with it, but others, Orlando, I think the women's team has really struggled. They just haven't been able to push the right buttons to click. Chicago is separate from the Fire, but they've partnered on things, and Chicago's found their own way. Utah's done a great job. Houston is kind of like Orlando. It's been a little just not quite there yet. And you hope that this is that inflection point for NWSL to continue to grow, to expand, because you need to. We've seen how expansion has helped MLS. But also a club like Houston, a club like Orlando, Sky Blue hopefully turning the corner. The bottom of the league lifts up too. And it's not just adding more great new franchises at the top. You're strengthening the rest of the league as well and raising the overall league level and profile.
Yeah, the best sign of a league is where the results every week are unpredictable, that you never know who's going to beat who, that every game is a real challenge. And I think when you get to that point where, yes, there's an underdog, yes, there's a favorite, but anyone really could beat anyone on any day, then that's a great sign of a strong league.
Right now, it's predictable. The North Carolina Courage have been dominant. Can they continue to be dominant? We'll see what their roster looks like and how this salary cap structure looks if they can keep everybody. We're going to be talking a lot more about NWSL and this offseason because it feels like a huge one for the league with so many big decisions, so many key things that have to be done in the correct way for the league to continue to grow. More expansion coming. Lots of things to talk about. We'll be digging more into it with Jess and with a lot of different folks as well. But also, Jess, before we go, I want to get your take. Reports out of Marietta this morning, Michael Parkhurst has returned to training for Atlanta United.
That guy's insane.
That was pretty much my reaction too.
I don't know what medication they're giving him, but it's got to be strong. I just read that he probably has a brace on underneath, but I mean, that's got to be your captain. Anyone that sacrifices their body and their pain, because maybe it's okay physically, but I'm sure there's a very high level of pain going on with that. That's a leader and someone that really wants to sacrifice their body in potentially what could be their last one or
two more matches.
Two, that's what we're hoping, but I'll knock on some wood right now for you because that was a bit too confident.
At the max, it's two more matches, and that's what the coach. It's like if you're a gamer like Cap, and you're sitting there, and it's like, look, I got 2 matches left in my career. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that I can be there with my team.
Yeah, I'm glad for him. It is a shame that Robinson, I believe, was not in the picture. But
correct.
We'll make it work however we do it. I'm confident. I'm confident in Frank and his defensive line.
What's your early keys to that one?
Oof. Defend properly. Don't misjudge any high balls like LGP did last game. And I always get a goal early. Always get a goal early. 2 games ago, yes.
Give him his credit. He played really well against Philadelphia. I thought he was very good.
He avoided a yellow. Which was the most proud moment. I felt like a proud mother. But I think it's 100% get a goal early and set the standard early on and get into their heads because, again, the longer Toronto stays in the game or even if they did get a go-ahead goal, that's the confidence they don't need to be given.
Yeah, exactly. Right there with you. We'll be talking more about that one as we go this week. But, Jess, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. We'll be talking to you soon.
Anytime.
We're going to take a quick break, come back. We'll get into the news out of Marietta. We'll get into anything else you guys have for us on the Twitter timeline right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, October 28th. All the things happening at the moment, as we talked about with Jess. Michael Parkhurst training, Miles Robinson not training. When you look at Atlanta United and Toronto on Wednesday, Parkhurst training with the first team. I mean, I think you got to see how he handles it, how the pain threshold is, but if he's training with the first team this morning, you'd have to think that he is under very strong consideration for starting on Wednesday.
Yep. And the question from Jason Heinley along those lines, since you did mention Miles, Jason wants to know if there's a possibility of Mikey back in the starting lineup.
100%. Why wouldn't there be? I mean, Mikey Ambrose was outstanding on Thursday night. Mikey, just because you haven't seen him with the first team didn't mean he wasn't ready for that. So
right.
That's the value of Atlanta United too, and that's why it is very important to keep up with. I mean, when you can watch, if you're on ESPN Plus, it's kind of a no-brainer, but at a minimum, keep up with who's getting those minutes, who's performing, what the conversation is around it, because that's what a reserve team provides to you. Because if you're doing your job and building a roster, you're going to have more players than you have spots to play. You're going to have more players than you have spots on the 18-man game day roster. And they have to play. And when they're playing and performing at a high level in the USL Championship with Atlanta United 2, that's going to give them consideration when needed to play with the first team. And I think you'll see that happen more and more. And you just look at this year. You look at Florentine Pogba early on. Atlanta United 2 is where he got fit and where he built up his match fitness and his match sharpness. And very important contributor. Kevin Kratz has been playing with Atlanta United 2 since he got healthy. You have to turn to him. He's been playing. He's in a rhythm. Mikey Ambrose, that's why he was able to give you what you needed here. It was very, very important. So the twos have value in this team, and Mikey and Pogba are two guys who have shown you that. Mikey could absolutely start. I mean, I think he's your best. If you're going to play four in the back, he's your left back. I don't think there's really an option there unless you want to be bigger and have Pogba as a left back who's going to sit more than Mikey did. Pogba will at left back, he can get a little adventurous, and that's okay to a degree if you have cover, but he's not going to be as mobile as Mikey Ambrose. We saw Mikey get forward more and more as the night went on Thursday. Ambrose is more of the traditional left back. Pogba is more of a converted center back playing on the left side. Merrim hasn't played left back. He's played as a wing back. So that's where your options are. If you want to play four to be able to free up Escobar to get forward, you're going to have to play Mikey Ambrose, I think. I think he's the better option than Pogba as a left back. Unless your instruction, and we've seen it so many times. Think back to New England on decision day, where they played Jalilani Baba as a left back, and he didn't really go forward too much. If Pogba plays as a left back, but really doesn't cross midfield very much, and it's very tilted to allow Escobar and Gressel to create an overload on the right side, okay, that can work too. So you've got two very different kinds of options, and that keeps Toronto on their toes. But from a traditional left-back standpoint, Mikey's your answer.
Kevin from Charlotte wanted to know if Remedi would be a part of it, coming into Shadow Pozuelo and moving Larry into a central defender to add more security/cover if Pozuelo pulls Remedi out. He said he believed Remedi had done this before and was very successful. I remember discussing cutting off supply lines, I think, with Toronto in the past.
Yeah, but it's different. If Pozuelo's the number 9, he's not pulling Remedi out. He's pulling one of your center backs out. So that's the huge difference. And this is also assuming Michael Parkhurst isn't available. If he's available, I think your best bet in a 4 is Parkhurst LGP behind Lorenowitz. And then you have the 3 of them deciding, all right, Pozuelo's in your zone now. You've got him. No, he's in my zone now. I've got him. Pozuelo doesn't play as a traditional number 10. That's going to be Marky Delgado. Pozuelo, if he's not the 9, he'll be out wide, and they'll try to isolate him. So it's a different conversation all the way around. When you get into supply lines for Toronto, where you want to break it up is Bradley, and it's the same conversation that was had about Harris Medunjanin with Philadelphia. You're going to need Barco, Pitti, Martinez, Joseph to make sure that it's difficult for Chris Mavinga, Omar Gonzalez, Justin Morrow, Auro to play to Bradley. You want to cut that off and make Toronto build up their attacks differently. Osorio's not exactly that kind of player. Auro and Morrow are going to get down the flanks. You want to be able to deal with them out wide. You want to cut off the initial supply line to Bradley because he's the one who gets the most touches. Pozuelo, a little bit different situation altogether.
Shiva had a question for you.
Okay.
At the beginning of the season, you thought that this team is playing a way where they don't have to change what they're doing come the postseason. Looking at the past 2 games, do you think they've done that?
Not dramatically. I mean, they've had to change the shape because of injury, and that's a whole different conversation. But think back to last year. They went from being what they were all season long to a defend and counter team. They're not a defend and counter team right now. There hasn't been much in the postseason about defending and countering, and that's all they're doing. Haven't seen it. So is it a little more cautious? Yeah, it should be. It's playoffs. You got to be smart. You can't be dumb. But they haven't changed in the dramatic way that they did last year. It's not even close. I mean, Tata Martino went really defensive last year and needed to because it worked. It showed. And that's why when all the conversation early on about Frank de Boer trying to make this team better defensively, it's like, well, duh. I mean, that's what Tata Martino worked on for 2 years and couldn't get it to where he wanted, so he had to go just completely defensive in the postseason. And the fact that it worked is a pretty big surprise, to be honest, because most teams can't do that. Atlanta had the players capable of it and the manager, I think, who was able to get the buy-in to do that. In a perfect world, you get a little more conservative, you get a little safer, but you don't change your whole identity going into the postseason. I think Atlanta's been able to balance that. Even with the changes in shape and personnel, I think they've been able to balance that much better. Are they done? Are they completed? Is the project completed for Frank de Boer to have them playing exactly how he wants and all of that? No, it's not. It probably never will be because that's the whole thing is you constantly have new players coming in, you have players leaving, you have additions and things that you're adding into your mix, but they're pretty far along. They're in a pretty good spot right now where we've seen them play 3-5-2. We saw them early play 3-4-3. Didn't really work. The 3-5-2 had elements of the 3-4-3 that made it work better. We've seen him play a 4-3-3 that has worked well. We've seen it look like a 4-4-2 at times, and that's worked well too. You've got different ways to play. You've got different personnel groupings that you can play. You're in a really good spot right now. You're able to cause other teams heartburn because they don't know exactly what you're going to do. If you're Toronto right now, if you're Greg Vanney, you see that Michael Parkhurst is training. You looked at them going to the 4-3-3 in this one. You've looked at them playing the 3-5-2 most of the season. You're really confused as to what you're going to see. Is Pitti going to start? Is he not going to start? Is Barco going to be up top with Joseph, or is he going to be out wide? Is Gressel going to be out wide as a wingback? Is Gressel going to be tucked inside? Is he going to be a right winger who's not exactly a traditional right winger? There's a lot of questions if you're Toronto, and I don't know if Toronto has the personnel to be able to change up a whole lot. They'd like to, but I don't think they can. Atlanta can do a lot of different things that still fits the identity of the way Frank DeBoer wants the team to play. That's where you want to be right now.
John Nason says, did you see that this is the first time in MLS history where no founding members have appeared in the conference finals? Seems impossible, but no.
Yeah, you would have thought that it would have happened by now because you're talking about 10 teams. But, yeah, this is the first time that's happened. You've got a club that started last year. You've got a club that started in 2017. And you've got the two clubs that epitomized, along with Portland, MLS 2.0. And I thought the Toronto-Seattle finals were the conclusion of MLS 2.0. That's kind of where I felt like. I felt like MLS 1.0 had some bumps along the road, but it continued on to the rise of Toronto, to the rise of the Cascadia teams, to the designated player rule, to Beckham coming in and others. That was 2.0. It concluded, chapter closed, with the Seattle-Toronto back-to-back finals. 3.0 has now been ushered in with Atlanta, with LAFC, with expansion. What 4.0 is, I don't know. But to not have a founding team at this point, I don't think it's a negative. I think it's a positive. But you look back at the founding teams. I mean, let's look at where they finished this season, and that's something that has been brought up at times, is are they keeping up in the same way? So founding teams, best founding team in the West was the LA Galaxy and FC Dallas. Those are the only two who made the playoffs as founding members. In the East, 3, but the bottom 3 in the postseason: DC, Red Bulls, rest in peace, Metro Stars, and New England Revolution. Columbus is going through a rebirth of sorts. Out west, Colorado feels like they're going through a rebirth of sorts. Sporting Kansas City had a down year. I think it's, fair to say that 11th place for Sporting Kansas City is not expected. And then depending on how you want to look at it, I mean, technically the Houston Dynamo would be that founding member because they are the former dearly departed San Jose Clash and San Jose Earthquakes MLS 1.0. The new Earthquakes, the current Earthquakes, are an expansion team. Neither one of them made the playoffs, so it doesn't really matter. We don't have to get into distinctions here. So out of the 10 originals, 5 made the postseason. I'd say all of them are in decent spots, though. I don't think anybody has been completely and utterly lapped and is an absolute mess. I think even the ones that didn't make the postseason, Sporting generally does. Houston, Tab Ramos should push it to another level. Colorado finished great, nearly snuck in. Columbus, they should be better. They were better as the year went on. I think you're okay with your originals. But yeah, I'm a little surprised this is the first time that's happened. Year 25 of the league starting next year.
And then there are moments in the day where I do miss the old Clash jersey with the scorpion on it.
Why would you miss that? Why?
I just thought it's cool. It was a cool logo at the time.
It looked like something that needed to be on a skateboard. There was way too much of the skateboard culture at the beginning of MLS.
No doubt.
The Tampa Bay Mutiny are crying right now, sitting at home.
And
they're mutant bats.
So would your Cyber Rays.
That's WUSA.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking MLS originals. Most of the teams from the WUSA are sitting at home crying because they don't exist anymore.
And then was it the skyscraper that was a part of the M in the Metro Stars logo?
Yes. They had taxis and they had all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it was very busy. Daniel Price has a look at the West. He says if Seattle can hold on and keep it even till the second half, then bring the game to a not so deep LAFC, who played an end-to-end gutbuster against the Galaxy, Seattle might win 1-0.
I don't think Seattle's winning 1-0. I don't see it. I think even if they keep it tight, you're still talking 2-1 type of game. I don't think they pitch a clean sheet at all. They're just not good enough defensively. I mean, out of the West, the Galaxy gave up 59 goals, which is obscene. Seattle gave up 49. They are by far out of the top 4 in the West, giving up the most goals. I mean, Toronto gave up 52. Toronto had some defensive issues early. Seattle, I don't think, has completely figured out what they want to do without Chad Marshall and with Roman Torres in and out of the group. So,
agreed.
I just don't think they can pitch a clean sheet. Can they sit back and defend deep? Yes. Can they play a double pivot of Christian Roldan and Gustav Svensson? Yes. Do they play a back 4 with 2 deep central midfielders and maybe try to figure out a way to make it look like a 4-3-2-1 kind of setup where you're basically telling Nico Ladero, Jordan Morris, and Raul Ruidiaz, like, yeah, go figure stuff out. We're going to sit back here and watch you guys. That might be the best way to do it. Even then, I don't know if they can pull that off. So it's going to be difficult for Seattle. Can they score goals on LA? Yeah, because LA defensively, not exactly great. Now, after that win, you got Walker Zimmerman back into the team. He didn't start. You would expect he might be able to start this week. That makes you better. You have not had an update on Mark Anthony Kaye, and I don't think Bob Bradley is going to be speaking to the media anytime soon since he gets angry about questions. So are you going to hear about Mark Anthony Kaye ahead of the game? Who knows? But if they don't have him, they're going to be frail in the midfield defensively, and Seattle will be able to take advantage, but how much can they risk to try to take advantage? That's the question I have.
Mark Anthony Kaye has a lower body injury, and he'll be a game-time decision.
Get lost.
You will hear so much Stanley Cup injury-based talk about players going forward. That's the only way that I could describe it.
That's a stupid question. Who gave you that stupid question? Get lost.
I'll check my. You want me to check my Twitter timeline and let you know?
Yeah, I hope this dies down. I hope it stops. I'm getting a little tired of. Now we've seen Bob Bradley's agent chime in.
Agents.
Agents. Agent is the one that I saw that was chiming in with multiple expletives to describe the question and the reporter who asked it, which was a little much. Yeah. And Sebastian Salazar had more things to say about it. Like, I don't think it's helping anybody look good at this point. So could everybody please just stop?
Back away.
And if people want to keep talking about it, then they're going to look foolish. That's the problem.
Yeah. Michael Head has a bit of a tease for soccer over there this evening.
Okay.
How about a big shout-out for Pulisic's hat trick on Saturday? Second U.S. player to have one in the EPL with Dempsey, hoping this is his springboard for the Blues.
Yeah, not too shabby. A natural hat trick as well. That's the rare part about it, getting one with each foot and the head. That's pretty cool. He's got the talent. We've known it. It's been, one of those things. You go to a new club, it doesn't click straight away for whatever reason, and Frank Lampard could have been wrong. Christian Pulisic might not have been, delivering and training the same way. I mean, there's so many things that we don't know. But the fact that he was able to not completely struggle because of that and go in and take care of business in this game and get that hat trick, that's a credit to Pulisic. It's a credit to his character. And it's only going to serve him well as he continues on because he's going to be tested again. He's going to have moments of adversity. Man, he answered the bell in a big way this time. So I think it should be that springboard for him, but it doesn't mean he's going to be guaranteed a starting spot game in, game out. He's still got to fight for it.
And then last thing on the timeline as of the moment, going back to our discussion of the Bronx, Tafka says, real estate's always costly, so I'd love to see NYCFC designed a steep-seated stadium in the Bronx for about 30,000 folks.
Yeah, 30,000 would be a good minimum, I think, to try to hit. And, you're looking at a club that has been in the upper 20s when they've done their best and when they were new and exciting. And if you build a new stadium, you can get back to that easily. And I think you can get in that 30 range pretty good. I mean, if you can get a little more than 30,000, it'd be great, but 30 would be the minimum that I'd be looking for. And looking at the article, and I mean, I don't know that area that well, but it's not going to be a very wide stadium. It's probably going to be a fairly vertical stadium. So it could be kind of unique if they're able to pull it off and do what they want to do with this. So keep an eye on that. There's even some rumors bubbling up about New England getting closer to a potential stadium location, although that's kind of being bandied around a bit by some of the folks following the Revolution. A Mondays with Reddit type of rumor got that started, and we'll see if there's anything to it. Charleston Battery. Update on the Battery. They will be playing at Patriots Point Stadium in Mount Pleasant. That's at the College of Charleston next season. The club announced that. Also, Bob Williams, who has written for lots of different outlets, most recently at Sport Business, he reports this morning that the Charleston Battery will change ownership this week. Current owner Eric Bowman is the one who sold MUSC Health Stadium earlier this year for $6 million. That's where they're going to build condos out on Daniel Island. Team's moving out of that. Now it looks like he's going to sell the team as well and probably make a nice bit of money on it. I think he might make more money off the stadium than he did off the team, but I think he got the team for basically nothing when he did. So keep an eye on Charleston. It was great news to hear that they've got a place for 2020. They're going to stay in USL Championship according to the post on the Battery's website. That was a question that I'd had. Would they go down to League One? Now it looks like you could have new ownership. So keep an eye on all of this swirling around in the Low Country when it comes to the Charleston Battery.
And we will have our last Charleston Battery Weekly of the season coming up at the end of the week. Yeah. And obviously Poppy Miller will be on there, and we'll chase some other folks and see what we can come up with for the last Battery Weekly of the year. And so, of course, in the USL Championship playoffs, the East was chalk and the West was chaos.
Yeah, that's what happens. Welcome to the postseason. Things get nutty.
And so let's see. Birmingham got knocked out 7-0. There were 2 PKs and a red.
Yeah.
And, so not the way that the Legion wanted to exit the playoffs, but good season first year for Birmingham. Lou City knocked off Tampa 2-1. Indy 11 beat Red Bulls 2-1-0, and Nashville beat Charleston 3-1 in the East. In the West, Sacramento beat Reno 1868. El Paso Locomotive knocked off Fresno.
Hold on.
Yes. All right.
There's more to both of those. I mean, Sacramento the 7 beating the 2 in Reno.
Yes.
And El Paso the 6 seed beating the 3 in Fresno. Phoenix won, but it was difficult for them after a scoreless draw. They won on penalties to beat the number 8 Austin.
8-7.
In penalties, yeah. And in the 4-5 Real Monarchs won big 6-2 over Orange County. But Sacramento won the play-in game. Now they've beaten the number 2, and now they get a matchup with El Paso, who didn't really expect to be hosting a playoff game at this point, but they're going to get one on Saturday. Sacramento's got a path to the Western Conference Final. I mean, that's doable for them. And likely to see Phoenix, although you do have to wonder a little bit with Phoenix after that long winning streak being broken. They kind of stumbled a little bit after that. And then this was not exactly convincing. Austin taking them 2 penalties and taking them deep in the shootout.
A lot of folks are going to be taking that tape and breaking that down with what Austin was able to do against Phoenix to take them to PKs there.
And in the East, it's Pittsburgh hosting Lou City, Nashville hosting Indy. Those are your Eastern Conference semifinals. Nashville, Indy, that's going to be a slugfest. Honestly, Pittsburgh, Louisville could as well. I think both of them, you might be taking the under on each one.
Yeah.
Both on Saturday night. Pittsburgh is 7 o'clock. Nashville is 8 o'clock. So big games. El Paso, Sacramento is Saturday night, 9:30. Friday night is Phoenix. It's the 10:30 kick in the East where they host Real Monarchs. All of them are really compelling games for different reasons. You've got the two upset specials. You've got Phoenix trying to complete the best USL season in history. You've got a Pittsburgh team that nobody expected to win the East, but is now in the semifinal, and that's an amazing venue to watch a game from. Lou City, who's been the powerhouse in the league, who stumbled a lot this season, but now has a shot to get back to where they've been. And Indy and Nashville, like two kind of bigger markets. I mean, this is Nashville's swan song in USL. They'd love to go out as a champion. And Indy is a team that I think aspires to be bigger, and now they're starting to kind of match that with their performances. So really good matches around USL Championship. I'm looking forward to this next round of the playoffs.
Yep, right there with you, because all of the compelling stories for different reasons, and you're going to see a lot of unders, but it's going to be quality soccer, and looking forward to it this weekend.
Yeah, going to be good stuff this weekend. Going to be good stuff this week with the MLS Conference Finals. Tomorrow night, it's LAFC in Seattle. We'll give you everything you need to know about that one tomorrow. Atlanta and Toronto on Wednesday. All kinds of stuff coming out of Marietta today. Michael Parkhurst training, Miles Robinson not training. Frank DeVore will be speaking to the media here in a bit. Make sure you're following all of our all-star friends like Doug Robertson, like Chris Furmeister, like Joe Patrick, like Felipe Cardenas for all of the latest out of Marietta, because DeBoer will probably have a couple of things to say about Parkhurst's availability, and maybe he'll give some hints about what he's thinking for Wednesday. Maybe he'll be cagey. You never quite know. Frank's always an interesting interview because he's generally pretty open with what he's thinking, so I'm curious to see what he's got to say today. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in. Come join us at the Brewhouse Cafe tonight if you can. If not, listen on the app. Soccer Over There will start at 6 o'clock. Lots of stuff from around the world to talk about tonight. Join us if you are able, whether in person or electronically. Talk to you then. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata.